Okay, I think it's live again. This is Pete from the bottom of the helix. It's going to look a little weird because I have to look up to read you what Frank has all done in his life. He's been a model railroader since 1966, life member of the NMRI since 1981, and a former member of the Yosemite Shortline Modeler Club. At home, he models Twain Harte and Sonora Pass Railroad, as you can read about in the November-December of 2010 edition of the Gazette. With Mike Blumenstad, he built an HO layout for the NMRI display at the California State Railroad Museum. Please welcome the PCR Vice President, MMR 514, Mr. Frank Markovich.
Hi, everybody. Clinic today is going to be detailing wood structures. I presented this a number of times. There are a lot of slides I'm going to go through. I won't read every word, but you see my email down there, and if you go to frankmarkovich.com after this, I will post it within a couple hours. He's read everything about me. I am married in the Gazette. There's a picture of my layout that was in the Gazette. And here's a couple pictures of the museum project. It's in a garage. It hasn't been installed yet because of the COVID-19. Everything was commercial except ground cover was sifted dirt. And Mike Blumenstadt and I built it. All the structures were from Woodland Scenics. And it was supposed to show that an average modeler could build a really good looking operational layout. There it is from one end. It was built so that the last section shows the various stages. Goals for the clinic: show you some prototype wood, old and new, both interior and exterior, a variety of rolling stock and structures, and examples of the above. And then I'll talk about techniques, logical treatments, and beyond that, methods to speed things up and keep costs down, how to simply apply grain detail, paint, peeling paint, weathering, the silver gray look, interior woods, effects, rotten wood, yes, it does rot, bleached wood, weathering of stained wood, different than painted. Some things that attack wood, don't forget mold plants, rust, dented wood, broken wood, and doing it all safely. Most of what I learned was from others, 95%. And real wood doesn't just weather over time. There are dents, discolorations. I backed into our garage door, so there's a dent from that. I'll have to fix that. Effects from water, wind, cracks, splits, even animals, fungus. I'd like to thank Mick Greenberg, great modeler, and Colin Emerson, both close friends. Colin has passed, but it taught me a lot of what I know. I watch every video I can, and I read as many books as I can on the topic. In all cases, there are at least 2 references for what I've done. Most is done before assembly. Some things you can't do till after. And I found what works for me. You may find other things that work for you. The most important thing really is to have fun. The first step you should do is study the prototype. Mick, Colin, and I used to go out and take lots of pictures, particularly along the coast in California, old beat up structures. Make notes. You can use other reference such as books, photographs, videos. I use the internet an awful lot now. Eyewitnesses, if you can find them, because sometimes they can fill you in. I model up in the Sierras in the Tuolumne area, and some of the buildings are so beat up you can't tell how they actually looked when they were new. But I found people who do know. That can be a hobby in itself. I modeled Twain Harte and Sonora Pass, which is a takeoff of West Side lumber, and you notice weathering over time. Sometimes I won't do heavy weathering for structures, but I might other times. So this first picture I'm going to talk about is dispatcher's office. This photo was taken about a year after West Side and Cherry Valley shut down. They were a tourist road, short-lived, but you can see the peeling paint. And right down here, you can see how at the bottom is weathered more than the top of the building. Here's my favorite locomotive, shade number 15. And if you look at the wood down here on the steps and the bunk, you can see how rough cut it is. And then look at the fence. It's a rough cut fence, and you can see weathering. You can see grain detail. I don't know how much you can see online, but if you download my thing, presentation, and the building, how it has in the Sierras, you get this dark, almost black weathering over time of wood that's outdoors. Here's a West Side snowplow. I built like 4 of these, 2 from scratch. And you can even see the grain on here. Now this plow burned last year, and they're rebuilding it at the Nevada County Narrow Gauge Museum. But the hardware all made it, but the wood was just trash. This is good because you can see a lot of different textures here, and not just of wood, but even of the metal. Look at this, just all rotted here. You can really go to far extremes. If you actually did this on a model, it might be too much. People think you were exaggerating. Here's indoor. Again, this was a car shop at West Side Lumber, interior. And there's a few things you can see. You can see that sometimes the bats came off, and you can see how the weathering came through the walls on the side, and different discolors. This was a few years after West Side itself shut down. There's exterior of that. And again, look at this black, okay? And the various shades. This has stain on it, but these originally had stain, but it's no longer there. There's another shop, but look at the water tank up here, and look at the weathering, the white from the minerals seeping through and bleaching. You can get that with stains, and even I've even used bleach and then put it under a light. Make notes, write everything down. That's really important. I have books of notes. Real wood. I've tried to make other materials look like real wood with mixed results. I've got a couple of flat cars by Foothill Models that are resin, and I've made them look like real wood, but it took twice as long as if I had real wood. The effects just are difficult to accomplish with other materials. I also find it fun to work with real wood. Maybe I would have been a carpenter 100 years ago. Lots of choices now, and I'm going to give examples of them. You have strip wood, scribe wood, coffee stirrers. One of the guys in the Yosemite Short Line built all these structures with coffee stirrers from different coffee shops, sheet woods. And you can use different types of wood. I've even cut my own because you may want to have a wood that you can't buy. Redwood strips are hard to get, but you can cut them. Real wood also takes stains well. I know you can do this with various plastics I have, but it's not the same look. And then one of the things for castings, such as windows and doors, I always paint them first with a raw wood color, then continue from there. Floquil cyan gray is a good choice, but there's pale wood. Basically, to get a 3D effect, you want to see some depth in the wood. And because of the modeling, you have to exaggerate a little bit. Model logging, and most of those are where there was snow in the winter. And then the other thing, it's fun to add as much as to a model, as long as it isn't totally overdone. You should look at times to some of Chuck Doan's stuff to get an idea of how far you can go. Stuff's beautiful. Here's some examples. The Yosemite Short Line. and you'll see some of the boardings aren't even fairly even, not perfect. Wood is worn in many places. It brings a flat car to life. There's a flat car, and you can see the grain detail. You can see the individual boards. I like board by board usually, but you can also see the grain detail. This was built missing. Uh, you can do a lot of ways of knot holes. You can use a old soldering iron or wood burning. I like detail. This is scribed wood. It really, now obviously the doors and windows are board by board. To try it, I will do it because it's easy to break them. There's a pickup. You put it on this. Show, and I have broken windows. Here's a caboose number 4. I've built, this is HO. You can see the variation in color. And one of the reasons that I did this was I took a picture of the real caboose a long time ago. I honestly don't remember what year it was. And that's how the wood looked on the side. This is all, in this case, it's scribe wood, but I really worked it. Next thing, here's some models by Mick Greenberg to show some peeling. That, and he uses the, or he used the rubber cement pickup. A close-up of a window. Okay. Now, one of the things I did a number of years ago, I made a sheet where I took wood and both strip wood and scribe wood, and I made a chart of the various things I did. I almost always start with a gray wash, a stain. And if you can get, there's a number of examples of light stain. Stain, really the first one works best if it's a some sort of alcohol or base, something other than acrylics. And I used to use the flow quill driftwood, which you can't get anymore. I will confess I have 2 quart cans still. I started with 4, I'm down to 2, and I still use those. So here's different examples of peeling paint. Here's some rotten, look at the bottom. The boards are, I just worked it really a lot. This is sort of fun. You can do it while you're watching TV or listening. I listen a lot to books on tape, and I'll work the wood then. And then questions before you start, even with a kit. I do more scratch building than kits, but even with a kit, you need to ask, is it new or old? Is it in disrepair? How long has it been in service? Has it been taken care of? The era, makes a big difference what era it was. If it's before the 1900, there's certain types of things. In fact, the framing is different. Lots of times, instead of 18-inch center, it's 24. Location, I'm in California in the foothills. The climate, well, the climate where I'm at is cold and snow in the winter and hot and miserable in the summer. Actually, not miserable, but it's hot. What it was used for, okay? What, are you going to put in interior? Plan it from the start. And then the framing, examine the wood that you get. If necessary, sand it smooth unless a rough cut is desired. I like Kapler. I really prefer Mount Alberta, the wood that I use, but I've used various woods. Could be scraps, coffee stirs. They are hard to distress, but they look good. And I even like using siding. I don't want everything. I don't want everything to take a long time. Um, you know, sometimes when I had a project that took me months, I'll go to something that takes me a week at the most. Scale. Wood grain on Z would never be same. And G, you better do wood scale or it's going to look unrealistic. O, S require a little more than HO. But I've built 2N scale layouts and I've it on the structures. I've add grain detail at times to those. Must look real. You don't, unless you're trying to get the caricature look, make it look real. Uh, let's go back, sorry. Uh, you might want to exaggerate a little to bring out effects, just like Hollywood does. Or don't do it quite as much as a lot of theirs, but some. Must fit into the layout. Structures, you know, work real dirt. Bury your structures. You know, when stuff is just sitting on top, drives me crazy. Put some dirt around it or put bushes if you don't want it, you know, put bushes or something to hide it. Planning. I do a lot of planning. I was an engineer and a musician. And as an engineer, I did a lot of planning. So here I built this tool shed. There's just the first page of plans. I drew out everything. Okay. Uh, and then I plan it out. So I even talk about how I'm going to stain it and stuff and how, you know, what I'm going to do. I'm going to add details like knot holes. This is for the same project. Here's the color. I'm going to spray a West Side color on the walls like you saw that first building. I have to confess I use the scalpel as much as I use the number 11. I put down India ink. I used to use grimy black, a thinned out version, but now I can use Indian ink or you know, and I use chalks. I like the Hunter stains. Hunter has a really good silver stain that I've gone to now. When you use a stain, you let it dry. I'll stain it and let it dry a week before I do anything else. Tools, X-Acto knife number 11 blade. I buy them by the box. File cleaner. When you got a large amount, you can do that. Wire brush. And I'll talk about, I made a tool that I started a long time ago to make it easier where I put 5 to 7 blades in something and use that to weather. I've used the Ponce tool for nail holes. I said it's not my favorite. My favorite actually is an old drafting pencil for nail holes. I can't show you today, but I normally would. I use a lot of brushes. I use a lot of inexpensive brushes for dry brushing and stuff where you don't need, you know, you don't need a good brush. Hobby ruler. I use old t-shirts cut up to apply paint quickly. I use lots of scales and weights. I use a ruling pen for applying super glue so I don't use too much. I use a lot of T-pins for holding parts down. Rubber cement pickup. Hairspray, another way to do it is hairspray. I use hairspray a lot for trees, but you can use it for peeling paint. You spray some on, you put your other color over it, and you pull it back. Salt also works. You can lightly get a little saliva on your finger and salt and put it on there. You spray or pad paint on it and pull it off. That works really better even for doing metal. Use a lot of chalks. I use ACC a little. I use carpenter's glue or the yellow glue mainly, and epoxy when something needs to be heavy. I use lots of palette. I use cottage cheese tops, masking tape, blue tape. I have a number of cutting mats. A large one makes it easy. Paints. The isopropyl alcohol with India ink, I prefer the 99% less chance of warping. And it's pretty good. The Hunter line works really good. Driftwood stain, I have 2 pints left, but you can make it. Here's CN gray if you can get it. Rubbing alcohol, leather dye. I don't like rubbing alcohol because you get it on your fingers and your fingers stay black. I talk guitar and people look at you, they want to get near you, okay? lots of stains. You can't get Floquil, but you can get the same type of things from various paint stores. I find I go into different paint stores and I ask them, I show them what I have, and they can usually match it. Bragdon's chalks, okay, acrylics. There's the acrylics I use, some of them, polyester substitutes. I like Vallejo paints for some things, but they don't work well for peeling paint. The peeling paint doesn't work as well with the Vallejo and some of the high-end paints. They can be sprayed, brushed on. MIG is another good paint. Safety, and you know, we are all into that now. Wear safety glasses. I work in a well-ventilated area. I work in a garage. I have a spray booth. Wear gloves. I throw dull blades out. I don't even wait. If I think at all they're dull or they've used them a while, always cut away from you. If you can, you have an organized space, all common sense. I like to experiment. I've tried just bleaching wood. I've had some luck with it. Watch lots of DVDs on weathering. Distressing tool, a wood distressor, dental tools, file cleaner, wire brush, barbecue brush. Dental tools really I use a lot. Okay. Wood racker. So here's, I got this from Mount Albert. You can, I first built this like in 30 years ago. I would chuck 5 blades into vice grip. But then I found you could, I tried different things. I epoxied it in, but you can buy channel stock and put it in epoxy, and then I will use the rubber stuff to make a handle, okay? And that really helps. Build your own, you'll have this. The size you need is 5/32 times 5/16 KNS. And I think it holds 6 blades. And you can move them down the wood. Don't try and move them just straight. You know, sort of take the wood, the blade, and do sort of serpentine types patterns. Other tools, you can use a razor saw, file cleaners, any tool. Grain detail, I have knot holes. I explained that already. Here's a close-up of some of the other things I've done to samples. I really suggest you make a page of samples to show. I used, and then other tools, Northwest Shortline choppers, I have 3. True sander, that really helps. A disc sander, small disc sander, a cut-off saw, duplicator, good for good scribe siding. I use lots of single-edge razor blades to cut the wood. It's better than X-Acto knife. Again, modify windows and doors. I like to scratch build them, but if you have a lot, it will take a lot of time. Again, the bottom of walls should have more roughness to it. Lots of times I'll take it after I build a building, I'll really work the bottom of some boards and then put a brown-black mixture of stains. I almost always dry brush a little bit. I use some chalks, and I'll use, it's not on here, but I'll use ground foam, really fine ground foam for moss at the bottom, especially if you need to hide something. And then if you have a metal piece, you want some rust coming down the wood from it. I'll use a fan brush to get that. Here's the various methods of peeling paint, salt. You talked about hairspray. Another thing you can do is spray on some alcohol and then immediately try and cover it with acrylics. Acrylics won't stick and you can pull them off. Okay. Another way, get an old t-shirt or similar material, fold it up, get just a little paint on and then dab it on and leave, don't try to cover the wood. You can leave spots that look like peeling paint. So I've seen guys that do marvelous jobs on it. I've done it. I think the rubber cement works best for me. After all's done, you can add in some chalks. Remember, more weathering towards the bottom. Light coat of India ink. I don't use actual dull coat. I'll use the Tamiya instead. Dull coat will fog up after alcohol. Krylon or the Tamiya flat finishes work better for me. The Tamiya is really nice, but it's not cheap. And dry brushing, again, I think most of you know, I use it a lot. I use white, I use black sometimes, I use other colors, and I by the time you look at the brush, you can't even tell there's any paint on it. You should try what I call snake oil, the Micromart, A West Weathering, Experiment. You can get good ideas from some of the kits, magazines, books. Green Frog, Daryl, Huffman, Paul Scholes all have. The internet has a lot. Magazines. Like if you're waiting in a doctor's or dentist's office, that's where you can do a lot of reading. Clinics, other modelers are my source. So you can contact me there at frank@frankmarkovich.com. My website is frankmarkovich.com. Makes it really easy. If you're in the if you ever come to the San Francisco Bay area, you can contact me. I'm here about 2/3 of the time, but we also spend a lot of time with grandkids. So any questions, you can ask them now.
There are a few. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Have you used regular wood stains from the hardware store?
Oh, yes. NMRAx. I've used NMRAx a lot. Then you gotta. I like to open them up before I buy them, but lots of times you need to thin them. They're a little thick, but I use them all the time.
Okay. In one of your photos, you showed a window that had the bottom left part of the glass broken.
Yes, I actually use real glass.
Real glass?
So I break it before I install it.
Wow.
I've used clear acrylic, but I don't like it as much as real glass.
Okay.
It's also easier to clean. I'm in a pretty dusty area, so the real glass is easier to clean with a really soft brush. It doesn't smear.
So the audience is still typing questions, but while we have a few minutes, can you tell us a bit more about the NMRA museum layout?
Yeah. So very briefly, Mike and I were contacted a few years ago we built a number of layouts for the NMRA for display. And to build a memory, I don't know if you remember that program. Charlie approached Mike and I, and we built 3 layouts, one in HO. Problem with HO was transporting it. It wouldn't fit in the back of a car or the back of it had to be vertical in the back of a truck, which meant we had a sail on the back of the truck. No matter how much we tied it down, the wind, Bay Area gets windy. So then we built 2 in N scale that would fit in the bed of a truck or the back of a car, like a CRV or an SUV. So then they asked us to build this layout for the museum project, and we built it in about 6 months. It's taken some time to install, and what the goals of it were as follows. We were to use commercial products as much as possible. You know, obviously some of the ground cover wasn't, the wood, the foam, that stuff, but everything else was commercial, all the railroad oriented stuff. Woodland Scenics gave us all the structures, they're all lighted. Cotto gave us all the track. Woodland Scenics also gave us a ground cover. Boston gave us the engines and rolling stock. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. And the goal was to have 2/3 of it completely scenic and have the last third show like the foam, plaster cloth, and then the framework with the electronics underneath. So we did that. It was picked up by the exhibitor group, and they were building the cover for it because it's going to be covered. And then COVID-19 hit, and we don't know where it is now, but you can't even get in the museum. And it looks like it's going to be a few months before you'll be able to get in the museum.
But that's the layout that people would see, right?
Yeah. I'll go back. Let me start the slideshow again. And I'll show you, I'll get to it pretty quickly. So here's one side. You can see there's a sawmill in various structures. We've got a road. The road was from the material from Woodland Scenics, the asphalt. The track is all the Cotto track, and we weathered the ties, weathered the wet rail, put ballast over it, and it looks pretty good. I defy people looking at it to tell us just the sectional track basically. The rock, Arizona company makes all the rocks and stuff. That's some of their stuff. And here's these Woodland Scenic structures, by the way, are really pretty good. We weathered them up like some of the things I talked about in the clinic, and with a little bit of work, and I mean like an hour at the most on each structure, they become realistic. There's a far end. If you see the far end by the garage door, you can see how there's plaster cloth, then the blue foam, and the only reason we have blue foam and not pink is it's the manufacturer, and that's what we were able to get. Okay.
So a few more questions. Someone just ordered a label wood kit, and his plan is to use real paint for wood. Would that be worth trying?
If he thins it out, and I put it on really, I'd be very careful of how thick I put it on. Be better to do a few thin coats than one thick coat. And I would, so that's an HO kit. I built them in my prime, long time ago. You could use regular paint. The acrylics are, even the inexpensive acrylics that you can get at Michael's and Hobby Lobby are pretty good. You thin them with a little bit of water and they look really good. What I would do is take a piece of scrap and try it first before I painted anything I was going to spend a lot of time on.
Okay, so he also got a Tichy stock car, and he wants some suggestions for weathering it in the 1910 era.
Well, the first thing I would do is use a silver gray stain as a base stain, very light. And then I'd use various, and you can buy these like at the hobby store or at, actually I would go to a hardware store, light stains, and dab it on, try and go a lot of thin, thin it out really good, a lot of thin rather than one heavy. And every time after you do the stain, let it dry at least a few days, because the stains should be petroleum based, not water based. So they need to soak in and dry.
So gray first or stain first?
Well, the gray will be stained, but a very light silver gray. Any wood that's outside any period of time starts to develop that silver gray look. Yes. But make it very light on that kit, and then add in. Sort of depends what area is he modeling.
We will have to wait for a reply for that.
Okay.
So we got 5 minutes left.
Look at a lot of, because probably Colorado. Look at a lot of the pictures you can find at the Colorado Railroad Museum of some of the items there, or pictures that, a lot of the Colorado Rail annuals will have a lot of pictures that would be a good guide. Again, experiment before you go at it.
So that's all I see for questions. So let's do a little bit of the modeler's life idea, and you tell us about this 1970 Gibson archtop.
Oh, well, besides being an engineer, I played guitar and made my living at it. And then I taught at community college for 47 years, part-time. Nobody gets a full-time job in music, hardly at all. And I played, and I have an older Gibson L5. I have two archtops. I also have a Howard Roberts custom. And the L5 just sounds beautiful. Sounds good acoustic, sounds good electric. And the interesting thing, I have the L5 and then I have an ES335, and they're only a few serial numbers apart.
Wow.
So they came down the line at the same time. And people really like the 335. A lot of students have offered me a lot of money for it, but no, one of my sons is going to get it. The 335 is a very versatile guitar. I wouldn't probably use it for country, but just about anything else. It's an okay jazz guitar, just okay. It's a really good guitar for rock, R&B, blues, other styles of music. For country, it doesn't have that twang. You can't get the twang that you get out of a Tele or some of the Strats. You can get that twang out of a Strat by doing some things to it, adding more metal. Like I've added metal to the headstock on one. And I've swapped the pickups, which I don't recommend unless you really know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. So when the social distancing goes away, are there any live performances that we can come see?
When the social distancing, well, lately I've been playing mainly in church, but we'll see what happens. Like, obviously can't do any concerts now. In California, it looks like we can't do anything probably till there's a vaccine. So we're looking probably the end of the year at best.
Wow.
I mean, Governor Newsom really has clamped down hard. And I do have a haircut. I got a haircut 2 weeks ago. But to get it, I had to drive up to Twainhart to a barber that was open against the rules.
We will cut that part out of the video.
Huh?
We will cut that part out of the video.
Oh,
so
yes,
there's no
please.
evidence.
I don't want him to get in trouble because I'm going to go to him in another 2 weeks.
So, Frank, very, very, very much. Thank you for your time.
And I'll be in contact via email with you on, you asked me to look for other clinics for you.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And to all our listeners, if you are willing to give a clinic here, we still have plenty of open slots.
Okay. I'll get you a couple anyway.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.